Welcome to Juice Podcast. I'm Emily Harmon.
I'm Gwen Douglas.
And today we're talking about amphora, clay.
Clay wines.
Clay is actually not a nice word to say, is it?
No, it's not that nice. It's not a sexy word.
It's not a sexy word.
But makes some pretty interesting wines.
Yes. What do we know about amphora? What is an amphora? I think is the best way to start here.
So I think of amphora as being a closed vessel made of clay that's then put in a situation where air doesn't come in. But I could be completely wrong. I actually don't know much about it.
Was essentially, it's a clay vessel. And actually, if anybody has watched any, even if you'd watched Hercules, the Disney animation Hercules, you would have seen amphora in that. So if you've been to any sort of ruins, Greco-Roman ruins, ancient Greek ruins, and you've seen these, not conical.
They're just like a vase.
Yes, vase-shaped containers. These were what wine was originally stored in. So originally, I think this was actually originally developed for transport, but also for storage.
So are they air-free?
They're not air-free, and I think so. Actually, the amphora is quite a primitive vessel when it comes to winemaking. So it's very fascinating.
Okay.
Very, very fascinating actually, and because of that, I think it started to come back. So obviously, like any industry, technology develops, and everybody sort of slowly moves forward with modern technology, modern techniques. However, what we've seen in the last 20 years, we've seen the amphora coming back into winemaking, and there is a reason for that, and we will get to that.
Okay.
But historically, this is how wine was
made and
stored and transported.
Okay.
Yeah, so the little, I think the archaeologists call them doliums, the small ones that would be filled with wine and used to be transported.
Okay, like a small, like personal stash.
Yeah, and you often saw them like actually in the bottom of boats, because of the way that a boat is shaped. They would store perfectly there, so the whole bottom of the boat would be lined with all these doliums filled with olive oil or wine or whatever. So it's quite interesting when you look at it. But unfortunately, because of the fact that they're made from clay, they are quite fragile. So even though you're transporting them,
you can't bump them.
Well, they could break quite easily. Even installing them. So now today we're seeing a lot more amphora, which are also known as tinajas in Spain, tinaja, and qvevri in Georgia. They are very fragile. One, you have to be really careful how you transport them to that place, and two, when you're installing them into the ground, if you're installing them into the ground is another question.
So are they installing them into the ground or into water as a way to like make it that there's no oxygen? Is that part of
No, it's something, so it's got nothing to do with oxygen.
I'm curious about this because I've seen that some amphora is put like to the bottom of the ocean, or people are doing it in water, and obviously that's a way to like stop oxygen. Would it not be? To put it underwater? So
I haven't seen any amphora going underwater.
I only know this because someone told me that they bought a champagne that was like one bottle had been...
But that's the bottle, not the amphora.
So it had been aged, one in a barrel and one in amphora and one underwater. Yeah, it was so weird.
But where would they be putting that on?
I have no idea.
Okay, we'll have to research that off camera.
I could be just making it up.
I think,
anyway.
The reason why some amphora are buried in the ground is that the ground acts as a natural temperature control.
I was going to say, is it temperature? Okay.
Yeah, so because of actually, even if it's hot or cold or whatever, the ground has a bit more of a moderating...
And I guess water does too, depending on where you are. If there aren't currents going around putting amphora in water.
The difficult part with water, again, I'm not an amphora maker or somebody working with amphora, so I could never say this with 100%, but what I would assume is it's quite a problematic vessel to use underwater because it can't be sealed completely. Because of the way that they seal amphoras are quite different. So you can seal them
like with wax or something.
So the way that Georgians use the qvevri amphora is that they're always buried in the ground.
Okay.
So you have this natural temperature control. You never have to pay for any temperature control. It's actually once you've bought your amphora, it's a very cheap way of making wine actually. And this historically is how wine was originally made. So somebody produces a Qvevri. It's just also good to point out that actually the Qvevri now in Georgia and the production of Qvevri is UNESCO.
A heritage.
Yeah, it's intangible cultural heritage.
Oh, amazing.
So now because of that, it's slowly coming back, because I think Alice Firing wrote a book on Georgia and also on the use of the Qvevri, and at that point there was only 3 people producing Qvevri in the whole of Georgia.
Wow.
Yeah, and equally there's very few people producing amphora and good amphora.
Wow.
One amphora, like 1,000 litre amphora, takes 3 weeks. 3 weeks to produce. So you have to build it, and apparently you sort of, with the clay you build a layer, then you add another layer, and that goes on for days. That takes around 2 weeks, and then you have like this big fire pit, like a kiln.
Crazy to fire it.
Which to fire it, but then you have to build a wall to seal it in with the fire, and it's a wood-fired fire. Leave it in there for a week, then you have to break down the wall. Obviously, you wouldn't do it with just one. I'm sure there's more than one in there, but still, it's a very time-consuming.
Totally. Wow, I never actually thought about the construction of them.
Yeah, it's incredible. So
and then you keep one, you use it again, or that's
it's like you use it until it's
like having a barrel until you like bust it open.
Yeah, I mean there are Qvevri that live for years.
Oh, amazing.
Like centuries.
I never really thought about them being made.
Yeah. You just have to keep them clean. But you have to make sure that you've secured, if you're burying them, you have to make sure you've secured them well, because if there's movement or there's rocks nearby, then you
if you're cracking and
and then if you fill it, you've lost all that wine. So
what a nightmare. 1,000
litres of wine is a lot. Be awful.
Yes.
So then, but essentially, this is really the very fundamental, quite basic way of producing wine. So we'll get to that. So you've got this buried in the ground. So like, say we were here, you just see like a ring,
like a hole.
A hole, exactly. Yes, a hole is not a ring. The hole would be there, and the wine would get filled in. Usually, whole cluster or whole grapes going in, whether it's white grapes or red grapes. Everything gets chucked in.
Okay.
Then it's left, like fermentation happens or whatever. After fermentation, it's then sealed over winter. So they would do this by either putting another clay lid on the top or a piece of glass and sealing it with mastic.
Okay.
Like mastic gum. Yeah. So that would like
make it airtight.
Yeah. And then leaving it over winter and then not touching it, reopening one up. Okay. But yeah, so it's quite interesting. And actually when you go to Georgia, you see people doing this on their property, in their garden, in their garage sort of thing. So it's a very, very different world.
Sounds very
and what's wonderful about it is you're seeing preserved history without any influence of modern technology.
Amazing.
And I think the way you can clean it is a number of different ways. So I think you clean it slightly differently depending when you're using the amphora. So if you're using it before fermentation or whatever, I think there are some people that burn sulphur.
Yeah,
but there are also people that I think they use it's like a cherry wood brush to clean it. Lime
there'd be some sort of natural things that would like be natural into,
and you can seal them inside with different bees, like I think wax and different things. So there's that, maintaining your Qvevri that way. Removing the wine is very primitive. So basically when you go to some of these places
like
in Georgia, well, it's not even that. So if you imagine like a large wooden spoon or like a wooden stick with like a bucket on it.
That's it.
They're just scooping it out, scooping it out by hand.
Oh wow, that's time consuming and.
Yeah, it's all done by hand.
Yeah, cool.
Yeah.
I was like, is it going to be some sort of?
But they do, like, because of actually what's quite interesting is actually not all of the Georgian wines that you taste, even though they're unfined, they're not filtered. And
is there a natural sort
contact? They naturally settle all the grapes, bring it down, so then you clear off quite clear juice actually. So it's
like making a clear broth.
Yeah.
You're just scooping off the top.
Yeah, totally.
And just leaving whatever's left on the bottom. Interesting.
So whether you bury it or not, in Spain and in Italy you see quite a bit of amphora. Not everybody buries them. So this sort of trend going back to amphora and Qvevri actually started around 20 years ago. Quite an eccentric natural wine producer. I don't even know if I want to say natural wine producer, but very eccentric, iconic Italian wine producer called Josko Gravner. Went to Georgia, saw what they were doing, and started ordering Qvevri. And I think this is why I talked about the fragility of Qvevri, because actually when when he was travelling back and the wines were, the Qvevri were being sent over, I think something like 50% of them got broken, which is a huge expense.
It's funny because you can get some good Grafner. You can get the Grafner around the corner here at a very nice little Italian place.
You'll have to tell me the name of that place. And
we don't want to tell everybody.
Yes, off camera. And so he started producing skin contact wine, long skin contact. In Amphora, made the Georgian way with local grape varieties. So now he's just focusing just on Ribolla. His daughter Marta's now much more involved in the production, but really Grafner was the catalyst for the trend kicking back off, because a lot of people followed suit. However, there are still pockets of Europe where the Amphora tradition. So I was in Segovia last year in central Spain, north of Madrid, visiting a producer called Ismael Gonzalo, who works with Tinajas, Spanish Tinajas, and that area has always used Tinajas.
Right, so it's just a historical.
And people would come locally, they would fill up like whatever vessel they had from home, they would bring them, fill them up from the Tinajas, but they weren't doing long aging. They would just have the Tinajas run off the fluid, fill up people's vessels, and it'd be empty for the next time they fill it. So a lot of clay around there, a lot of local people producing it. And actually the amphora that Foradori use comes from Spain.
Oh really?
Yeah, comes from Spain. So the Tinajas, Rafael Bernabe, or Bernabe Navarro, they were making wines in Tinajas and stuff. So
I'm ready to taste some.
Yeah, sorry, I've just completely
I was
machine gunned at you. Like, give me a break.
No, I'm really excited because we have a white and a red, which is cool. And since I don't know that much about Amphora, but I do know the wine that you've brought. Yes, we've had it before, and we were lucky enough. You've known them for years, but I was lucky enough last year to have a nice chat with
John and Ramaz and Shota, who are all working with Qvevri.
Yes, super nice gentlemen, good drinkers, and make lovely wines. I'm excited to try this one again. Or I don't know if I've had this one.
So this is the 2012 Mtsvane from Pheasant's Tears. So Georgia has a little special place in my heart, and particularly the wines from John, because actually I've learnt so much about Georgian wine through John. He's such a good spokesman for Georgia.
He's such a charismatic fella, and there's a nice energy about him. Oh my god, to use the bloody tank opener. Thankfully I don't have to deal with a capsule today.
I know, that's why I passed it to you. Oh, that's a good trick, actually, what Gwen's doing. I think that's good to know, is that you can always rub the wax.
I feel like
to make it easier. I know.
Insert really some weird, and it's a red wax top.
Yeah.
It's really awkward. But it's a good way to try and warm up the wax a little bit so that you don't end up with like little bits everywhere.
It's a different technique. I've not seen that technique before.
Sorry. I just thought I'd get all the edges.
It's a bit mean.
Terrible. It's a bit mean to make me use this bloody opener.
I know. You can, Gwen has to use the opener every time she uses the word Stromino, but the wax is very perfectly removed.
With no wax bits. I'm very proud of that. My technique works. Look at this pretty color. Beautiful. Gorgeous.
So Mtsvane is the name of the grape variety. So like pretty much every single wine that comes from Georgia, made with an indigenous grape variety that almost nobody can pronounce, but Mtsvane. And this is coming from Kakheti. Equally challenging if you're not familiar with the name, but Kakheti, we're about an hour or so outside of Tbilisi, and this is this eastern part of Georgia where it's the tradition of skin contact wine, where it's a bit warmer, still remains. Skin contact wine, obviously in Qvevri as well, so in Amphora.
I want to know how you describe the smell of this one.
Smoky.
Yeah, smoky. Oh.
Stone fruit. I get a lot of apricot, a lot of peach, slightly exotic though, almost pineapple.
I can see the pineapple a bit. I think it's tough for
like
me
tinned pineapple.
Yeah. Oh yeah. It's just something that's sort of tinny, but it's. I think sometimes The Georgian ones I struggle with on the nose because of the smoke. I think the way smoke is taken in is always a bit different. But it definitely like drinking these.
Smoke, and then there's almost like this like crushed, like almost like flower petal, like I don't know.
I do feel like it tastes
Floral
smokier
edge.
to me than it smells. Maybe that's just me.
But it's quite exotic. You get touches of honey, this almost floral edge to the wine as well.
I think also because there's a lot of acidity that also like.
Yeah.
I mean, also, was it last year or 2 years ago that you did the Supra at Mephisto?
Last year.
Was it last year? Was it the year before?
Yeah, because we did the podcast recording with them after.
No, the year before, the big Supra.
Oh no, but we did two. So we did one last year and one the year before.
I went to the one the year before. And actually, I think that was a really great thing for me understanding these wines more is eating it with the food that they eat.
Yeah. And by the time this podcast goes live, I will have been to Georgia again.
Okay.
But unfortunately, that won't inform this podcast. But yeah. It's interesting because actually it says on the back like a note of this particular varietal is white rose, and when that's pointed out to me, I can see that.
Totally.
It's like white rose on the borderline of musk.
Yes. It's a really interesting it's a really interesting wine. It's definitely one of those that makes you keep going back because.
But again, obviously an aromatic. We did aromatics already. With skins, it's obviously an aromatic grape variety with some skin contact.
The smokiness is really fun.
But I love the acidity in this one.
Yeah, it's super hot. I mean, look at the legs on this bad boy too. It's like.
So you asked before, we haven't talked about this, but you asked before about, okay, use an amphora, it doesn't breathe. It does breathe. So why would we use an amphora other than the romantic story of it being a bit of preserved history? So the reasons why we would use amphora are that the wine does breathe a little bit, but
it depends on the clay because it is porous.
And it's porous. So clay breathes less than oak, but obviously more than stainless steel.
Right. So it's an in-betweener.
Yes. So that's one of the reasons is that actually you have a little bit of this development coming from this like little bit of interaction with oxygen. Yeah. And I did write down a few facts about that. So 250 litre amphora breathes, or the evaporation rate is the same as a 1,500 litre vat
of stainless steel.
Yeah, and then a 2,000 litre vat to 3,000 litre vat has the same evaporation rate as a 400 litre amphora. So it's much lower. Yeah. Okay. And a 100 litre amphora is the same as a barrique.
But I guess it's kind of nice because you do get to then get that little bit of development from the oxygen without having to worry about it happening too quickly or things changing too much. So you can control it maybe a bit better.
Yeah, so it breathes, but the reason why
slower and
slower. Yeah, well, it breathes, so the wine can develop. Two, the interesting and fascinating part about the amphora is that it doesn't impart any flavour.
Right. So you get the best of both worlds, where you get the best of no flavour like stainless steel, but a little oxygen like
Yeah,
oak.
it doesn't impart flavour and it doesn't impart colour either. So the colour doesn't change with the wine.
Is there another method that would give you the same results?
We can use concrete as well, but concrete doesn't breathe as well. I think
concrete is quite dense, I think.
Yeah. I think the thing as well with the amphora that a lot of people talk about is also the shape. That there's like this sort of
roundness
and it's an organic shape as well.
It's actually pretty
so that's something that's discussed that I don't know enough about.
No, I'd be curious to
but that's something. That is something that's interesting to look into. And everybody says it doesn't impart flavour, and I would challenge that slightly because I do know that there are some wines that I feel like I can taste that they've been in amphora.
The type of clay.
Yeah, and it also depends if the amphora is clean because there are different faults that come with an amphora. So that's also the downside. That if you're not maintaining your amphora, there are bacteria that can be present.
But then I would also argue that depending on whether you bury it in earth or not, or what kind of earth you're burying it in, it also has density and an air movement that's going to be lower and slower or higher depending on how packed the earth is, what the earth life is in that area, what kind of water is going on in that area. I think there are lots of things that could, like variables that could change.
There is that, and there is the bacterial element. If you're not so clean, there have been some wines that I've tasted. So I've tasted quite a lot of wine.
What would be the fault on this?
So I spoke to John about this, John Verdeman from, I don't want to say it in a German way, John Verdeman from Pheasant's Tears.
We're conditioned.
But and I talked to him about it because I said, well, sometimes I see this fault in amphora wine, and it's not that they're corked, because of course the wines do have cork, but it's the aroma and the flavour is very similar to cork taint, but almost has this seaweed kombu edge in terms of flavour, which is very odd. So I said to him, I was like, why am I smelling these wines that initially people think they're corked, but I know they're not corked.
But it's not,
because there are particular wines that's in every single bottle. It's just not possible that they're all corked.
Yes.
And
so then it's a production.
It's seaweedy.
Yeah.
So that's down to, he said there's something, he said
it's
the
a wet
Italians call
bacteria
it muffa, and it's some kind of almost like a reduction that sometimes blows off. I'm not always convinced by that, but it is something that's present, and I think it's with when you're not maintaining your qvevri.
I'm going to call it damp. I'm going to call it damp, because if it's buried underground and it's wet, it's going to be some sort of damp bacteria.
Fungus. I think it's another. Yeah, I totally think it's a fungus.
It's
because TCA anyway is that. So it's. I think it's
in the same
somewhere,
family.
Yeah. So I don't know enough about that, but I think that's something that's on my little research
So actually, if
list.
someone knows some stuff about that, we'd love to hear about it.
I would absolutely die to hear stuff about that.
So I'd love to know.
Yeah. But this one doesn't have that, which is really nice.
Really nice.
It's also lovely to try wine actually that's got 7 years of age, but all of this fruit.
It's so fresh and lively.
I could kind of imagine you wearing a perfume like this.
Totally.
Peachy apricot, slightly exotic, white
it's
rose,
also a little
smoky and smoky,
and a bit masculine. It's like a good yin and yang.
Yeah.
There's a bit of everything going on. I also would love to.
The more I go back, the more of this floral character that comes out. But every time I try Mtsvane, it always reminds me of like tin peaches, tin apricots, tin pineapple, just like.
But don't you think the
fruit
floral thing
cocktail
works?
Slightly musky, body shop.
Because I also think of
white
like
musk,
like a hayfield. You know, there is a little bit of that like.
Yeah, that's
florally
nice.
hayfield like.
Yeah.
Kind of thing about it. Smells really nice.
The end of summer.
Exactly. It totally has that like lazy autumn day. Very nice. So what is I mean, I'm trying to recall what we ate. Like what I want to eat with this is like barley. I want to eat like a beef and barley soup with this.
What's that Chinese soup?
Which one?
Koji. Not koji, congee.
Congee. Yeah, like a big
Koji's
hearty.
Japanese rice. Anyway.
Like a big hearty soup.
Yeah, that'd be amazing with the meat.
I think a beef barley like pub soup would be great with this.
I
Something barley-ish. Like there's something
also think this like
grainish about it.
Game.
Yeah, totally.
Pigeon.
Yes. Oh my god, amazing raw pigeon. But I also think that hay and pigeon work really well together.
Maybe not a raw pigeon.
No, but I like the really
like
pink.
Yeah.
Whenever I eat pigeon out, it's always like really
pink.
And in the last few times I've had it, it's like hay smoked infused or whatever. This would be phenomenal with it.
Yeah, pigeon, game birds, chicken hearts.
That's a great idea.
A little bit of offal.
Duck hearts.
Even like calf's liver.
I'm not into liver.
For the vegetarians out there, get on the barley. For the meat eaters, liver.
Yeah, there's something really like
hearts.
earthy about this. You want to eat something that's like of the earth and like down and dirty.
Yeah.
It's good, I like it. Very nice.
It could only be Georgia.
I know, it's pretty special.
I also think maybe even like hard cheeses.
Pecorino, those like really Italian cheeses would be really good with this.
Not blue, but like
imagine like
just slightly soft, or even wash rind possibly, but not too
Granny
funky.
Smith apple with like big chunks of hard pecorino on top of like
that'd be really
Parmesan.
nice. Sheep, even sheep, like sheep's milk cheeses. Because it's a little bit funky.
I think because it's got enough character that it can get away with pairing with things that have.
And John always said to me as well, with these wines, think about like onion and garlic, which are almost impossible to pair with usually. These are robust enough that actually
you could put raw garlic with this and it would be fine. Because raw garlic is a hard sell for
There's
a lot
quite
of
a lot of garlic in Georgian food.
Yeah. And lots of floral elements, like a lot of the herbs they were bringing or spices were sort of dried flowers and that hay sort of texture with like wildflowers that are dried down and used as spices.
But it's interesting, isn't it? All those tannins and then this kind of smooth round texture that you see in the wine. It's really different to a wine that's been in wood.
Totally. Oh, I really like. Every time I have this, and you know, it's not something I buy for myself that often, but whenever I have it, I'm always. interested.
Continue.
Okay. So.
Nice. Very nice, that one.
Next up. It's going to be a hard act to follow, actually, because that was pretty delicious.
I mean, don't play it down. Let's see
I
what
don't
you got.
know. I haven't had this
I
one
do
before.
wonder if we've done it the right way around.
The right way around. Because I
Sorry,
don't know, I
a bit
haven't tried
wine
this one before. And I was at Pheasant, and I asked about what Amphora wines they had. And this was the suggestion. And I liked the label, and since I'm a sucker for a nice label, I went with it. So let's see, Mephisto.
So, Mephisto from Domaine de la Cue. So this is coming from the Loire Valley.
And I like the colour.
Oh, it smells good. What's the vintage? I'm assuming, is that the Cuvée MM?
Oh,
Is that the vintage?
Can you make me make some sort of...
2015?
Yeah.
I don't know what I got.
I was like, no, don't make me do maths.
Just give me Roman numerals. I've got us covered.
My tattoo, I should know what the fuck is going on.
Actually,
Roman
that
numerals.
should be, yes, I was going to say.
Oh, it does smell quite good.
Oh, it's very
meaty, actually.
Meaty. I was going to say that earthy, but like now this paprika, red pepper thing is coming out.
Making my mouth water, actually. Oh, like Hungarian, like paprika, totally, like a smoked...
Do you know what?
Yum.
Think about your favourite pizza.
Yeah.
Nduja.
Nduja.
Almost chorizo, like it's this
But a
smoky,
goulash with
meaty,
this would be
spicy
so good.
paprika.
Goulash.
You and your fucking goulash. Goulash, ratatouille, it's like anything with some kind of tomato element.
Basically anything right out of the 1970s, bring it on. I'm ready. And actually it tastes so much lighter. It's a very easy drinker.
We should have done it the other way around.
We should have.
Lessons in life.
But maybe it's...
How lovely are those tannins? They're so,
it's so
fine
nice.
and supple.
This is actually very nice.
Oh, I'm a big fan of that wine.
I love this little like meaty...
It's very soft and,
so
and delicate and but intricate at the same time.
That's very nice. Oh, I like a nice surprise because I'm always willing to try stuff at wine shops. You know that I go in and I ask for advice, and I love to get dealer's choice on stuff. And sometimes it's a hit, but sometimes I'm gonna be honest. It's more. I would say that I have more misses than I have hits if I let someone decide, because of course like everyone's taste is going to be different. But I really love trying everything because then sometimes you get pointed in a new direction, and it's good to try new things. So this is a great pick.
I love that it's got this tomatoey, again, this tomato, almost tomato stem, borderline ketchup, dried ketchup almost
really
note,
nice.
where it's like a little bit spicy at the same time, paprika, it's got this sort of red pepper note, but it's now the more that's in the glass, a little bit more lifted, the fruit's starting to come through, but classic Cabernet Franc, I think.
And I did say to her when she said it was Cabernet Franc, I did say that I love a Cabernet. I do love a little Frankie.
I like to hang with Frankie.
I love to hang with Frank, and I think that this is, I'm definitely, he's not staring me wrong right now.
So this apparently though is a mixture of amphora and a little bit of old barrel as well.
Ah, so it's I didn't know that it was a mix.
Someone did their fucking homework before they showed up today.
Not me.
Someone did your
Someone did
homework.
my homework. Yeah.
I can
So
imagine you at school just like.
That wasn't me.
I know you
I was
totally
such a
wouldn't.
good student. I was the best student.
Well,
How did I end up a tattooer? We don't know, but
well, this is why Gwen's going to be using this bottle opener for the next 5 episodes.
the tyke opener forever.
Every time she doesn't do her homework, she is disciplined. By
So I'm gonna get really good at using that shitty opener by the end of the season.
No, you're gonna get really good at doing your homework.
Yeah, we'll see.
Yeah.
So, but
so
what?
15 months in a mixture of amphora and old oak, and
So then, how do they mix it?
unfiltered.
They're just like putting half of it in amphora and
I
half
don't know
of
if
it
it's
in
half
or
off
just a bit
because
of
I didn't
some.
do it so in
Yeah,
depth
it's fine.
because
You
it
didn't do my
gave me
homework.
very little.
But I guess
the
you would
notice
want.
period was so tiny. But
So I'm guessing that they would do that because they want to have some of the oakiness and the vanillin, or whatever flavor they're getting from oak.
what are you trying to say?
I was trying to say like vanilla flavor.
Sounds of vanilla.
Yes.
Vanillin. Yeah, but I don't think this has any vanilla.
No, well they're trying.
Why are we saying?
I don't know.
8 times in one episode.
Are they trying to get? I guess they want some of what's happening in the oak and then some of what's happening in amphora. Obviously, they wouldn't do it
Or
otherwise.
maybe, I mean, this sounds a bit cynical. It could be that they only
It's
have
just
a
how it
limited
is.
amount of amphora and they decide
Fair
to
enough.
mixture.
Sometimes
Or
it's
it could be
practicality.
that, hey, we want a little bit more of oxygenation by this vessel,
Right.
so they wanted a mixture, just add some
Yeah, totally.
complexity.
Because I can see
See
that,
how the
like,
wines change?
right.
Maybe originally they were going to make 2 separate wines, but then they
And then
thought they tasted better
mixing.
blended.
Yeah, cool.
I honestly wouldn't know the correct answer without speaking
But
to
there
the
are many
winemaker.
answers
But yeah.
possible, which I think is interesting enough.
Yes.
Yes.
Yeah.
The many reasons why you would do this.
But again, what you see with this amphora, the texture of the wine is slightly different. Again, it's got this kind of like fine sort of smooth edge.
Totally.
It's almost like someone sort of airbrushed.
Yes, totally.
The edges
there
of
is
the
like
wine.
very soft in your
Yeah.
mouth. It's very nice. It might be just that I'm hungry, but I really want to eat pigeon. I'm into it.
Game birds.
Yeah, game birds.
This would also be really nice because it's got almost a bloody
Totally.
quality to it.
I wonder if that's a... You have to do some research and see if this is a thing.
I feel like we should go to Adana and have some grilled lamb after. That'd be
Yeah, I
amazing
feel
with
that
this.
lamb.
I know, you can have beef, I'll have lamb, pork.
Whatever. A hungry man to feed at home. But these are actually very interesting examples, and I think actually nice ends of the spectrum, bookends, because I think that where the Pheasant's Tears is, it's so exceptional in its taste and it's so different. This is also very beautiful, but it's very subtle in the ways that maybe Pheasant's Tears isn't.
Well, Pheasant's Tears is full blown orange as well, probably longer skin contact, much more
It has
structured and
yes.
more sort of savoury, a little bit more challenging.
I think it's a nice look at both ways that you can do this.
This is also a wine you could give to people and they
wouldn't
don't
even
know,
notice.
They wouldn't,
No, they wouldn't
maybe
notice.
They might just think that it's maybe just a little special.
But it's very nice. They're both very nice. Oh,
No.
let's calm down. Oh my god, I'm it's being placed in front of me. So I actually don't know.
I you should get a little, I should get you a little brooch.
Maybe I'll just like pin it to me.
A brooch that says, I'm wearing this because I like
Mephisto.
Yeah.
Maybe I'll make a shirt. But I
Don't
think for
make
now,
don't make a shirt based on that. That's a waste of time. No one's buying that
No.
shirt. You're the only person wearing that shirt.
probably
Which you could
which
just
is
wear it every
fine.
time we record.
It'll be my uniform. But I think that is there something that we should add in closing, because I don't know. I mean, I think that there's like making things in amphora is, you know, even though it's a special way of making something or it's different to the norm. I'm not necessarily sure. Is it something that you can pick out? Like if you're tasting a wine, you know, whereas you can taste like new oak or old oak or French oak or American oak. Is this something that when you're tasting a wine, you're like, that's amphora?
I think it's difficult. I think it would be quite difficult to do that early doors if you weren't
Right.
familiar. I think I would be. I think you could if you are working in wine, you're tasting a lot of wine, or wine is
Right.
really your passion. I think it gets a bit too geeky and a little bit more complicated to do that. However, as we've seen in these wines, and the point I tried to make before is this sort of this
Roundness and the
smooth,
softness.
softer texture. The way that you feel the tannins is slightly different.
Right.
The only way for you to learn and see where that's coming from is to try.
Yeah.
So to try, you know, there are some producers that make wines in stainless steel, in amphora, and then in barrel. Like it would be then interesting to try them side by
So
side.
this is what I was going to say, like my friends that
Like,
tried,
the
I think it
difference
was a
between- the
champagne,
difference
but it was
between-
something.
But the difference between drinking Radicon and Gravna is absolutely huge. And
Right.
one, okay, it comes down to the vineyards. Two, it comes down to winemaking. But Gravna's using amphora, Guevry, and Radicon's using large oak, and you feel it. The shape of the tannins is different. The style of the wine's different, and that's not just down to the winemaking.
Right.
That's also down to the vessel.
So, Face Off coming soon. We'll figure it out. We're going to do it, Face Off. But I'd also like to know...
A face-off.
Face Off, Gravna versus Radicon.
Yes.
Let's do it.
Up for it.
Let's do it. So otherwise, we'd like to hear, are there wines that you love that after this episode or before this episode, you knew they were made in amphora and you think that there's something special about them? Or wines that you think we should taste? is there a play? I don't know. What do you know about Amphora? I want to know because I don't know much. She knows clearly a lot more. And otherwise, yeah, you can find us on Instagram at juice.podcast.
On Twitter at juice_podcast.
You can find us online at juice.show where you can get a beautiful tote bag as pictured here in the video. And yeah, you should check out our YouTube channel because we've switched over to the visual.
We are, so you can see our faces.
You can see us. We can see how ridiculous we are.
You can see all of the frowns.
And you can see the nuances.
Yeah, yes. Nuances is a nice way to put it, Gwen.
Nuanced. We're now nuanced.
Yeah.
Streaming live on YouTube. Not live.
Yes.
Cheers.
So, one last thing. If you are tuning in and continuing to tune in, please subscribe if you haven't already.
Apple,
we would love you
Deezer,
to subscribe, even to the
Spotify.
YouTube travel channel. I've had too much wine, but we would love to stay connected.
Until next week. Cheers.